Minnesota, as its current political entity, emerged from the cessation of the fur trade. Uniquely situated as a destination for diplomacy, the confluence between the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers is where the eastbound Dakota met with the south-traveling Ojibwe to tend to alliances, and with the arrival of European explorers and voyageurs, use was expanded to accommodate commerce. Known now as the Twin Cities, the area's first modern development, Fort Snelling, began construction in 1819, 16 years after the Louisiana Purchase. Minneapolis was founded in 1850 and St. Paul in 1854. Astonishing how a society can dream so much into existence in just over 200 years. Before the concrete, glass, and electric light, corn and wheat fields, clearcuts, roadsides, and sewage lagoons, deciduous, floodplain, oak woodlands, and maple basswood forests made up the habitat. Deciduous forests are but one of 3 biomes contained within Minnesota. Tall grass prairie took up the southwest, and up in a narrow strip along the Red River Valley. Deciduous forest reached from the southeast to the south-central regions of the state, and coniferous forest from the North Shore and along the Canadian border. Minnesota's natural vegetation, as observed at the time of the Public Land Survey from 1847 to 1907, the general pattern of biome distribution still exists today, though severely modified by humans. Nestled in the heart of the deciduous forests of yore, the 7-county metropolitan area grew. Along the outskirts, where urban sprawl mixes with fields, forests follow rivers west. Farmsteads like this site, built between 1860 to 1880, popped up all throughout the state. The USDA acquired responsibility for the land in 1979 when it became part of the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. The Minnesota and Red River watersheds are among the landscapes most transformed by humans in the world. How much of Rice County, a neighboring county to the metro, was maple basswood, aspen oakland, and oak openings back in the 19th century? And by the early 1990s, only 2 small remnants of the maple basswood forest remain. Everywhere else now transformed into swamp and marsh, if not agricultural, residential, or urban development. Expanses of floodplain forest have been conserved along the Mississippi, Minnesota, St. Croix, and the Red Rivers, and a few of the Giant's tributaries, where annually deposited silt supports silver maples, cottonwoods, elms, and box elders. Debris collects where the last spring's waters rose. Unique due to their tolerance with saturated soils, floodplain forests only extend where annual flooding occurs. Wild grape, Virginia creeper, and poison ivy climb in entangled trunks, as nettles, ferns, mountain maple, speckled alder, mosses, and sedges compete for place in understory. These wetlands are now what was once the bottoms of the glacial River Warren. About 10,000 years ago, with the final retreat of the Wisconsin Glacier, the ice mass prevented the normal drainage of the Red River. The glacial River Warren flowed from this new drainage. Once the ice mass melted and drainage through Lake Superior and Hudson Bay reopened, left behind was a deep scar through prairie. The Minnesota Valley is a tiered landscape, where at its deepest runs the river and a variety of auxiliary, perennial creeks. Over 900 species of plants and animals depend upon wetland habitats at some stage during their lives. Plume hunters brought great egret populations to near extinction by the late 19th century. Throughout the 20th century, conservation efforts facilitated a rapid population rebound. Their range, year-round migration, and breeding locales again extends from Atlantic coast to Pacific coast and from the Gulf up to central Minnesota. Great egrets forage in shallow water, watching and waiting. With a quick thrust of bill, a fish, crustacean, frog, salamander, or snake is caught and made a meal of. River shiners are found in small, low-order streams with good water quality. Males select nest areas, where they display themselves for prospective mates. Sites are often 10 to 40 feet above water and trees. Nests are platforms built of sticks. Courtship entails a variety of calls, circular flight, contorting neck while pointing bill upward. 3 to 4 eggs are often laid. Up from the wetland, through the lowland forest, oak savanna stretches atop the uplands. Harsh weather patterns constantly shifted boundaries between narrow stands of floodplain forest and vast wetlands filling and drying in wildflower tinder oak savannas. Pollen studies provide evidence that wildfires occurred every few years in these savannas. Set both by lightning and humans, it is the frequency of fires that most likely kept the deciduous forests from spreading out, colonizing grasslands. Reverend H. M. Nichols described a savanna near Chanhassen, 1855. The face of the country here differs from almost every other portion of the territory. Trees stand alone, as if a part of what had once been a heavy forest. Cycles of degeneration and regeneration by way of these fires up here, as opposed to water below, also yields a nutrient-rich environment, hosting more permanent residents. Nocturnal animals like the raccoon, despite seldom being seen during the day, their presence is irrefutable. True for predators too. 90% of a coyote's diet consists of meat, bone, and hair. Cygnets stay with their parents through their first year, separating when they're 2 years old. These cygnets hatched this spring. Out in the open, natural selection in this refuge. Trumpeter swans once nested across North America unabated. When roads and cities began reaching further out from the east and west by the early 20th century, fewer than 100 swans remain south of the Canadian border. Human intervention is why these birds are nesting here. Trumpeter swans winter west of the Rockies in British Columbia and Washington state, migrating up to Alaska and as far east as Minnesota in spring to breed. Does this place look anything like what the swans' ancestors would have expected? How cycling seasons transforms water that soaks the soil, comprises lakes and rivers, and falls as precipitation into a solid, expanding, shifting ground, making solid the tops of rivers and lakes as snow collects, compacts, covering everything. Seasonal patterns are but one, perhaps the most dramatic, evidence to nature's resilience and mutability. Ecologist Henry A. Gleason describes secession of a landscape as an extraordinarily mobile phenomenon, a complex process that is dictated by multiple causes that lead through multiple pathways, with no fixed endpoint. Each tree, as every other plant and animal, responds individualistically to the abiotic and biotic components of their environments. Stages, more patterns, of secession reflect the oscillation of populations through time. Forest secession is also impacted by the animals presently occupying the available habitat. Minnesota is home to over 400 species of native bees. Bumblebees are, perhaps, the most easily recognizable specimens. Honeybees are smoother, and they are smaller and thinner. They express less black on their thorax and abdomen. They're also more orange than the bumblebee's school bus yellow. European hornets were introduced into North America during the 19th century. A type of wasp, hornets primarily differ in that they provide a more venomous sting than the native wasps. Bees, hornets, and wasps all serve a critical role as pollinators in the environment. Compare how these paper wasps build their nest. Instead of being enclosed, combs are layered under the protection of pre-existing structures. Grass spiders' webs are not sticky. Their intricate latticework entangles, momentarily trapping the legs of insects that land on their webs. Just enough time for the grass spider to dart, bite, thereby immobilize, and drag its prey into its funnel hideout. Water strutters walk on water. Their long, thin legs are covered with microscopic hairs that traps air, keeping the water from coming into contact with their bodies. This rare and conspicuous adaptation happens to also position them into serving a critical role as easy food. Mosquitoes, all of Minnesota's 51 species, serve a similar role, though preyed upon by many more: fish, dragonfly nymphs, and ducks, to identify a few. Crayfish are classified as ecosystem engineers by burrowing activities, which, in turn, also removes surrounding vegetation that provides critical fish habitat. Minnesota's deciduous forest collection of invertebrates includes snails. They serve a dominant role in the ecosystem's calcium cycling. Absorbing calcium from what they eat, snails concentrate this nutrient as calcium carbonate in their shells. Forest wetlands, considerably smaller than those of the floodplains, allure their own set of exotic guests for the summer. A green heron in the reeds. Unlike the great egret and trumpeter swan, green herons as a species have not been threatened. Less vulnerable due to their solitary nature. Almost secretive, these birds live along small, densely vegetated bodies of water. They stalk slowly, standing still at the edges of shallow waters, waiting for prey. They've been observed using bait, dropping a feather or a piece of bread atop the water, luring fish to beak. Mostly fish eaters, they prefer minnows. And, tight under shadows, the more experienced sunfishes. They'll also feed upon tadpoles, crayfish, and a host of aquatic and terrestrial insects. grasshopper is a favorite. Males choose nesting areas. Calling from high perches, they attract females who build the nests from materials they'll collect. Usually along waters and shrubs, nests are 5 to 30 feet above the water. Green herons typically nest in pairs, unlike the colonies maintained by great egrets and great blue herons. Usually 3 to 5 eggs are laid. Despite being fragmented from their own broader network, these remaining stands of forest have allowed species like the green heron to thrive along the periphery of human development, retaining some connection to their wilderness past, self-sustaining food chains, albeit if the food webs have been reduced. Forest decline relating to fragmentation, heavy deer browsing, and invasive species has reduced these ecosystems to isolated islands too small for many species requiring large home ranges. In addition to habitat size as a regulatory factor, only 10% of the available energy of any one trophic level is transferred to the next. For example, if a snowshoe hare consumes 410 calories of a plant material, only 10% is converted to tissue. And if by way of a red fox making a meal of our hare and, shortly afterwards, is captured by a black bear, only 0.4 calories of new tissue are absorbed from the original 410 plant calories. Reminiscent of a wilder past, once abundant apex predators still probe the edges of the cities.
It's become an increasingly common occurrence, sightings of bear, especially in the northwest suburbs. The most recent sightings occurred this month in the Elm Creek Park Reserve, a Three Rivers Park District.
In so many instances, the remaining intact food chains are those confined to the aquatic habitat. Largemouth bass being the most common of the large fish predators. They can tolerate water temperatures as high as 93.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Panfish linger in along the littoral zone where their young develop, staying close enough to dart into the lake weeds for protection if a colder water preferring predator ambushes. Northern pike, ancient are these sentinels of deeper water. Their genetics are over 80 million years old, emerging when Tyrannosauruses patrolled North America. Mallard ducks, as many other migratory birds, use the landscape as an endless buffet, leaving behind fertilized seeds here and there, everywhere they go. Straightforward is the movement of nutrients from plants to grazing animals and to predatory animals consuming the aforementioned. Most plants aren't eaten, and most animals aren't eaten. Most nutrients must follow another pathway through ecosystems. When leaves drop from trees during autumn, annual plants die, trees are blown down, and disease infects. This is when all this material's contents begin the process of becoming absorbed into, becoming soil. The nitrogen cycle is significant because plants cannot directly absorb this molecule from the atmosphere. An essential component for proteins, plant growth is dependent upon nitrogen. Atmospheric nitrogen must be broken down and then combined with hydrogen or oxygen, creating the mineral forms nitrate and ammonium. Majority of nitrogen a plant relies upon has been released by decomposition of dead leaves, roots, and animals. We call detritus any material that isn't eaten by consumers, organisms that obtain their nutrients by eating other organisms. Animals such as the pileated woodpecker and the downy woodpecker. break this dead matter into smaller and smaller particles. Detritivores, protozoa, nematodes, insects, and snails feed on feces and the dead, reducing particle size of detritus, making it more suitable for the process of decomposition or rotting when bacteria and fungi enter the food web. So many types of fungi, 2,409 are known. Bell Museum scientists estimate that the majority of native fungi species have yet to be named. Mushrooms are the fruiting body of a vast and more intricate underground living network. Like how trees' fruits contain seeds, mushrooms produce spores, dispersed by the wind or by insects and other vectors, spreading the fungal DNA to new areas. Not only mammals consume mushrooms. Under the soil, most plant roots are covered in mycorrhizae, what could be called the roots of mushrooms, that assist their hosts with obtaining nutrients and water in exchange for sugars that assist with fungal reproduction. Humans have engineered a more mutualistic relationship with a national icon. By the early 20th century, wild turkey populations were near depleted. During the early 1970s, Minnesota's DNR traded a flock of grouse for 29 of Missouri's wild turkeys. These birds were released and expediting population expansion. Succeeding generations had been trapped and released to new habitat in the following years. Minnesota's current turkey populations accumulates to more than 70,000 individuals. Aside from establishing outdoors recreation, the reintroduction of turkeys has also yielded some new urban nuisances. Juvenile males will become aggressive and chase after children and small pets. Dubbed highway turkeys, young jakes will also stand, walk, or pace in the middle of busy roads and highways. These tamed birds are no longer behaviorally able to survive long-term in the wild. The ecological theory known as island biogeography affirms that the number of species of a forest is related to the size of the forest, and that the rate of immigration of new species depends on the distance between similar habitat. Despite conservation efforts of raptor rehabilitation programs of municipalities, nature centers, and the like, the rate of extirpation of species in a forest is a function of its size. As a forest shrinks and loses more and more faunal species, the less and less its flora is like the forests before agricultural and urban development. The further such wonders of our natural habitat are relegated to the memory of memories.